Hello and welcome to today's episode. And I am delighted to have an amazing guest today. Now, of course, all of our guests are amazing. However, this one is super amazing because I've got no idea where she's beaming in from. And normally she would tease me. She would have a beach in the background, or she would have a cocktail or a smoothie bowl. I've got no idea where she is. So, Alex, welcome to the podcast. It will be great to hear, before we hear about you, to hear where you are in the world.
I am in sunny Bedford in the UK.
Bedford, wow, wow. And how is Bedford? How does it rank amongst sort of Bali, Thailand, and all of these other places?
I mean, I would much rather be abroad in Thailand or Bali or somewhere beautiful and warm. But this year I've decided to stay put in the UK over winter for family reasons. But yeah, so I am trying to make Bedford my Bali right now.
Fantastic. And I thought you were moving to London. There was a time about last year where there wasn't a single person who you came into contact with that you didn't mention you were moving to London.
Yeah, I mean, that's still on the cards. I would still love to buy a place in London, but that's just like a long-term strategy. And so 100%, yeah, that's still on the cards. And it's just really hard to find somewhere.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. So, long term strategy, that kind of implies the stuff we're going to be talking about today, which is actually going to be about professional practices, not banter between us. But, Alex, first things first, it'll be great to hear a bit about you and your journey so far.
Yeah, sure. So, thank you firstly for allowing me to be on this podcast. Amazing. And so, I guess like my journey started like probably from when I was at school. When the careers advisor said, if you want to be successful, like you should train to be an accountant because the accountants are really expensive. And if you learn about finances, you're, more likely to become like more successful in your chosen path. And I wanted to like be a business person at the time. I just saw images when I was like 9 or 10, and I'm like, I wanted to be like entrepreneurial. So it kind of started there. And then it kind of went on to, becoming qualified, doing my qualifications and AAT, business and finance, ACCA, and all of the kind of like entrepreneurial stuff. And young enterprise as well was part of that. And it kind of led me on to eventually one day setting up my own business. And then that ended up being accountancy practice because that was pretty much all I knew, like lived and breathed it from the age of 16. Then set up Soaring Falcon 2015 to be fully cloud, digital and tech and riding that cloud wave. Then wanting to travel the world at the same time. So what more could I do in terms of like travel the world, set up a business? So having the two together, it meant that I could then travel the world using all the technology that was available to me. So ended up with international clients and then helping them launch in the UK and vice versa, utilising tech out of everything. And then just recently launching a new company, locally based in sunny Bedford.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. That's a quick run over of my journey of where I am today and how I've got here.
Fantastic. I love that. So, whilst we've got a core subject we're going to talk about, I do want to dig a little bit deeper into your journey and ask a couple of questions. So, it's actually really
Absolutely.
refreshing that we've got another 16-year-old starter because I'm pretty sure, now we pre-record these in batches, but I'm pretty sure that the guy I interviewed earlier was a 16-year-old starter, as was I. And it's
Ooh.
really worrying. I mean, Alex, we're the same vintage. So it is worrying. I don't know if you've actually realised this, but next year we can be those old practitioners who say that they've had 30 years in practice.
I know, I
Hard
know.
hitting, but we're still millennials and we're going to cling on to that. But I'm really interested. So, as a 16-year-old coming into accountancy, hearing about it from a careers advisor, but it's still, like, even today, not being a traditional method, not an obvious method of coming into the profession. What what did you learn on that journey, and do you feel that you benefited from that journey versus perhaps going to A levels, university, Big Four, and perhaps what might be considered a more traditional route into the profession?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so much in that because I learned so much. I'm very a practical person, so it was important for me to just do hands-on work because I learn much more quicker. I think you kind of do these like tests of like what's your method of learning, and I was just very like hands-on. That's how I'm going to learn much more faster. I didn't want to like have debt at the time. I'd already left home by that age, so I knew it was important for me to do something that was going to work right, that was right for my lifestyle at the time. And so doing the work within a practice, I was actually volunteering. So everything was manual, sticking the trial
Wow.
balances together,
I
calculating
remember
payroll manually.
remember those days, the A3 sheet of paper, and you're just
Yeah.
hoping it all adds up at the end.
Correct. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
was like, printing it off and, sticking it together. It was just really bizarre. When I think that that's how we used to do accounting, it's really weird. But I'm really grateful for my learning and what I had to do back then, because that's what's helped me, to get to where I am today, understanding how people do it today. Even there are practices that are doing it manually and businesses that are doing it still manually, but because I've been on that technology journey at the same time, it's enabled me to learn all those systems and processes, like from the manual perspective and what the then software actually does. So during my school time, they brought in computers, so whenever I would go into a new job and they were manual, it was just really easy for me to go, we can switch that. So that system
So
and process changes started from a young age.
totally. We were blessed that we were of the generation where we didn't all have computers ourselves, but school had a computer room that a few years older than us wouldn't have benefited from potentially. We got to learn things like Windows and so on natively, Windows 3.1, if I
Lotus
remember
1, 2, 3.
correctly. But even when it comes to things like social media and so on, I remember at the age of 16 at school, we'd go in, and this is probably why I left before my GCSEs. We would mess around and we'd go onto chat forums, which were basically the equivalent of what is now social media and connecting with people online. So we had an advantage, both professionally, but also in terms of understanding the bigger picture of how the world is now looking compared to those, I guess, a few years older than us. So, with that in mind, obviously you learned the hard way. The old T accounts and the ETBs, extended trial balances for anyone who's not prehistoric like us too. You learned all of that stuff manually, and you learned it the hard way. But then you became known in the accounting world, I think it's safe to say, for your prominence and advocacy in the community for online software providers, technology. They're two very different things. What drove you to be so passionate about the technology? First of all, back when you was employed, before you started Soaring Falcon.
I guess when you can see that something is going to take a whole day or a whole week compared to systems that are going to take you like a couple of minutes, I didn't really understand like why people were doing it this way. It was just like, I'm really confused. And in one of my jobs, when I said, can you convert it? Can I do this in Excel? And they asked me like, what was the benefit? Like, I was just really confused about, okay, how come you don't know what the benefit is of computerizing this right now? So when I learn all of the systems and processes and I can see the efficiencies that is going to be built into my day to day, obviously I can then do more work. And so I would then train other people within my employment. And the same mindset applies to my business today and to my clients and to accountants. There is always a faster, efficient way with whatever we decide to do, and there's somebody that's developing it. And as we've come from a non-internet based to then internet to then software developers to then cloud, etc., now AI, essentially that has then excelled and grown. And so where I love to advocate is to help those people essentially that don't really understand it, where it can get them from and to. So
Got it.
if
Alex, I'm going to rewind a little bit because that's exactly the point that I wanted to bring out here. So this whole podcast series is, we've got quite a strong ethos behind it. and
Yeah.
that is to debunk the one-size-fits-all methodology that some believe is how you run an accounting practice. This is the only way, but also to help the broader practitioner community understand what is possible, what is the art of the possible for their practice, their dreams, their vision, and the great work that they do for their clients. So you mentioned that you had to really become an ambassador. You had to become a Microsoft saleswoman and explain why Excel
Google.
was so great. Bearing in mind, and jokes aside, bearing in mind that we've got a broad cross section of practitioners here, there might be some who might have reluctantly adopted Excel now, but are perhaps a bit skeptical of future steps, technology, outsourcing, fixed fees, all of these kinds of things that we know can potentially improve their practice if it's the right fit for their practice. What would your sales pitch be for building efficiencies through tech and outsourcing?
So, I mean, it's always starting with, like the basic tool that you're going to use every single day, like an accounting software. So I would like literally start with that and then just focus on that one item. Because once you've learned the efficiencies within one software, you start to open your eyes to what possibilities are with other vendors and other softwares. So I wouldn't overwhelm myself with loads of product. We were at the stage where we had only a handful of products, even back in the days. So now it's overwhelming for a lot of people, even for myself. So I would just start with a product, just one solution before, and then moving across your business to see what other solutions there are available to you. But I wouldn't go adding multiple products at the same time. I'll just start with one.
100% agree, 100% agree. And I know you've spoken to a number of practitioners about these kinds of changes. So we will touch on I guess, the change management piece on this as well. But that was an amazing sales pitch. Yeah, my key takeaway here was to keep it simple, stupid, to really focus on actually just doing one thing at a time. You know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Just focus on one quick saving, perhaps something that you urgently need, rather than feeling that you've got to make all of these changes to your practice and do everything overnight. And I've got to say, that was a whole lot more compelling than perhaps a manual-based accountancy firm trying to sell you this pen. There we go, corny joke of the day done. So I'm really interested in your journey offshore, first of all for you and then for the firm. So I don't want to go into too much detail personally about why you did it unless you want to elaborate on that. But it will be really good to understand what your vision was for the business. So if you could tell us where your business was at the point that you decided to become a digital nomad, what changes you had to make, and what your vision was longer term.
So I guess when I started the actual practice, the goal essentially was to travel. That was it. So, that started off at a slow, steady pace of me going away for a week at a time and working out where are the weaknesses within my practice. Once I had discovered some of the weaknesses, I would then tweak what that needed to be. Like, what do I need to change? And most of it was around communication. So what tools can I bring in so that we've got methods of communication with the team, but also with clients. So then I brought in tools that was going to work well with clients. So every time I went away, like I would then highlight where my weaknesses were and then bring in the new tool to fix it or to resolve that problem. As I started to go away more and more often and for longer periods, it was then the other people around the world became more, like they were more available, because in the early stages they were not. So today, outsourcing is just the norm, but back then it wasn't the norm. And so, it's not like I did this in secret, but I was doing my research in the background. Because essentially, when I first started my practice, I didn't have the team that was ready, available to do the work that I needed them to do. They were either too young, didn't understand practice or accounting, but they understood the tech and they could learn quickly, or they were too experienced in their role and they didn't understand technology. And so I really struggled with people and bringing the right people into the business who would really understand my vision and my goal. And so to combine those two back then was really challenging. And
Yeah.
so I would constantly have to find a solution to that problem. And it was like really, really hard. And so as time went by, where ACCA were bringing in digital, like the digital side, where a lot more accountants were then jumping on the bandwagon and going to conferences. And my goal at the time, where I was advocating, was like getting the digital side out there, so more and more people knew. So then people within, like the students, will then learn all the digital side, because then I could then hire people that were then knowing, they would then understand the practice as well as digital.
Got it. Got it. So back to I guess just to rewind a bit before we pick up on that point. Obviously, becoming a digital nomad. So you started going away for weeks, and then these weeks became, I presume, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months. At some point, you must have flicked a switch and said, "Right, that's it. I can see if I can do this." And whilst this might seem a superfluous question, given that we are going to talk about offshoring, you actually offshored yourself, and that is actually remarkable when we think about it, because when we look at an average firm that considers outsourcing or offshoring, it's generally the more, I hate to say it, commoditized roles. It's the roles that are more algorithmic, that are more functional, that are perhaps more easily replaced by tech down the line. But you actually went all in and offshored yourself. So I know that you do this. We met in Bangkok, and I know that you had your laptop with you. So I know that you're actually working out there. But what logistical problems did you find with working at first?
So first of all, it was getting used to the time zones, but now I think that works in my favor. So that was a little bit of a challenge for me. Then it was, my clients are actually online, but at the beginning they were not, they were international, but at the beginning I did have some local clients. And
Yes.
so that was some of the challenge I had, was that they didn't like the fact that I was out of the country.
You've got exactly where my questions are going here. How did they find that? How did they handle the fact that you were Alex in person to Alex on a video screen? You were Alex speaking at, let's say, I don't know, 11 o'clock in the morning, to Alex speaking at some strange time. Did you adapt yourself, or did they adapt to you, or did you actually change the makeup of your client base?
So what I actually did is, a lot of it I did in secret, so some people weren't even aware. It was
Is
because
this
I
the
just
big
wanted to.
reveal?
Well, I mean, I have mentioned this before, but maybe it could be the big reveal. But I did it in secret to test it, and that's when I talked about like my systems and processes and why I changed. So I used a communication method where it had a non-international dial tone, and it was a UK number, and so when you called it, it just sounded like I was in the UK. That was just one of the
Okay.
changes I made. And so things would be, if I was having a meeting, I'd do it in the UK time zone, and then I would find like co-working spaces, office meetings, hotels, etc. So then, and then use backgrounds and things like that. So that came out. So I was just like changing things slowly in the background. And so when that happened, then it was the mindsets of others, like they didn't seem to be that concerned about my whereabouts. But unfortunately, COVID hit. And so COVID made it acceptable. And so everybody then realized, okay, well, we're going to be at home, we can be based anywhere, etc. And so it was actually COVID that was like the deal breaker for me, because once COVID happened, it then was more acceptable that I was going to be in a different country, but I would work to UK time zone. So it wasn't the easiest time, and it was challenging, but you do have to pick the right client. If you've got your client avatar, your correct one that you want to work with, it shouldn't matter where you're based, because you're delivering the work. It doesn't matter where your team are based, because you're delivering the work. If you're doing what your essentially paid to do, and you're delivering it to a high quality, high standard, then where you're based doesn't matter. So
Okay.
if they need a face to face, then we can still do a face to face. It's absolutely fine. We just need to plan it.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So I want to bring the conversation along a little bit. So as I say, your digital nomad journey is it's actually fascinating that we're speaking to you around outsourcing and offshoring because you've done that to yourself. And a lot of firms kind of consider whether they should dabble with it, and there's some quite polarized views on it. I mean, first things first. What is your take on the view of outsourcing versus not outsourcing?
So I get that there's a lot of, there are like a lot of like political like questions around whether you should do this or not. But I do believe that if you've got the right team and the right person to do that job, and that they're going to do it to the level that you want it to, it genuinely shouldn't really matter where they're based. And if they are working to your time zones and your etc. that you need them to work around the client base, you have to have all those, the contract built really like carefully. That really shouldn't matter. But I do also appreciate that if somebody is local to me and we can meet face to face and build the teams and build, everything, around like having face-to-face catch-ups, that's equally as important. So I'm not denying the fact that that's not important, but where I had teams overseas, I would go and visit them and I would train them face-to-face because I know how valuable that is. But ultimately, it's about the culture that you build within the company because, the most important part is the team, and then they will then deliver to the clients.
Absolutely. So, I just want to ask you one question around the crossover between offshoring yourself and operating a business that runs with a outsourced offshore model. And then we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. So, in terms of the lessons that you learned on the way, by offshoring yourself, what lessons did you learn? What things did you pick up where that actually supported your wider business and how you might employ other people?
When you travel, you get to meet different types of people and different mindsets and different cultures. And I learned a lot on my journey on my travels about how people work, how they operate. I learned I learned so many different systems, methods, ways of working, ways of communication, because I watched to see like how everybody else was doing it. Because I'm not the only digital nomad in the world. I wasn't the first, and I'm not going to be the last. Like there's thousands of people, and so you learn how they do things, and you meet entrepreneurs, and so there was a massive learning curve, and there still is, on how to do things really, really well and really successfully. The thing that happened with me was that I recognized that traveling made it easier for me time zone wise with different clients. So I've got clients in Australia, New Zealand. So when I was based in Thailand or in Bali, it worked in my favor because I would work with New Zealand, Australia in the morning, and then I would work with the UK in the evening. So there was actually a better balance for me.
Love that.
Yeah,
Love
yeah,
that
it
because it's
worked
so
really
hard.
well.
I know we've got a couple of franchisors that are in Australia. Absolute nightmare trying to speak to them because you're looking late evening, very early morning, and I'm not good at either of them. So, I totally appreciate you sharing quite openly and candidly about the learnings that you had had on this journey and so on. Um, Obviously, when it comes to outsourcing, offshoring, and we'll dive into the difference between those in a moment, it's a much bigger step, actually, in one respect, than offshoring yourself. Because ultimately, when you're sat in a cafe in Bali, if you decide not to take your laptop, that's on you, Alex. It's your business. It's on you if the work doesn't get done. Um, that's all well and good. When it comes to having a team that are remote and not in the same physical country as you, what kind of things do you need to think about? What checks and measures do you need to put in place? What big things have you learned on the journey, and what tools have you used on that journey as well?
So the weather was one of them. So if you're going to like offshore in different countries, you have to be more aware of what their climate is like. Strangely enough, because then or like and generators like backup and things like that. So I found that with Sri Lanka and with the Philippines. So you get to learn like the issues and the challenges that you have with different countries. So when it comes to like the support that you have to give, you just need to make sure that you have the backup in whatever situation. Either they have an office to go to, etc., or you've given them the tools that they need within their home, so that if they do have something like that, then they're prepared. Not always, you can't always fix that problem, but as long as it's something that you can do within 24 hours, it's not major. But I did have to jump in a few times to get things sorted out where there have been emergency situations.
Sure. And how about, we know that these natural disasters happen, sadly.
Yeah.
We've experienced them as a business, so we see them. But during business as usual times, how do you remotely manage the team? How do you make sure that they're doing what you need them to do on time and to a good level of quality?
Yeah, I think so. It comes down to contracts, and it comes down to like the times that they've agreed to, and definitely it comes down to the technology, because today everything is cloud and visible, and with our work you can see whether things are getting done or not. So we've got deadlines that we have to meet, and we've got the dashboards, and we can see the stats of, okay, you've got 1,000 transactions to reconcile, and at the end of the day there's still 1,000, then there's a problem. So it's using like the stats that you've got there available, and like having the overall view of the practice. I used to use a product where it used to like clock the efficiency, the productivity of the team
I
as
remember
well.
you telling me about this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you
so
came up to me all excited at Accountex, I think it was, about this new tool that you had just found.
yeah, so I implemented that, and then it then gave me like a really good understanding about the efficiency and the productivity. But it was actually quite low early days, and then when I went to see the team, and I didn't mention anything, but I was just watching them and just like understanding how they operated. And again, it comes down to culture. It's like they like to be in the office, they like to chat, they like to do this, and so therefore efficiencies would drop. So unless somebody's there like on that side, then it's not going to be as productive. But you just have to be aware of things like that.
Got this completely, and we're actually going to take a little bit of a rewind, and then we're
Yeah.
going to ask some clarifying questions about your journey, because I imagine we're going to have a broad range of people listening to this, and they will all have their own views on whether it's something they want to explore, whether they can utilise outsourcing and offshoring,
Yeah.
whether they could be listening to this to try and reinforce any paradigms that they have as to why it shouldn't be done. There'll be a whole spectrum of views, but there will also, I'm very mindful, there will be a group of people who are a little bit confused, and potentially when they hear about having to visit the teams and set culture and so on, they might be saying, wow, I'm not signing up for this. So, first things first, outsourcing and offshoring. Can you concisely give your view on the difference between the two, please?
So offshoring, yeah, is if I'm like hiring a staff that's not in the country that I'm working from. So if I'm in the UK, then I'm offshoring to Sri Lanka, I'm
Yes.
offshoring to Bali or to wherever, whichever country. And outsourcing is like outsourcing a function to a contractor, which essentially could be based anywhere. But most people would look for that to be like within the UK, or a contractor within
Absolutely.
the country.
Yeah, so very generally, just to add my perspective on it and my experience of working with firms, as you say, offshore, it's your own team member overseas, and we'll come a bit more onto that relationship in a moment. Outsourced is where you maybe pay per hour or per job. You might pay a set fee for a set of accounts to be prepared or a tax return to be prepared, but it's a pool of staff. You don't know the people, they don't necessarily know how you work. They have a set process which is defined by the agency as opposed to defined by you. Even if you abdicate as an offshore team member, if you abdicate that to an agency. So, second clarifying question,
Yeah.
do you use an agency? Do you find your staff yourself? How do you do this?
I tend to find staff myself, and it's usually through my network.
Okay. And do you feel that that's something that an average practitioner could do? Or do you feel that you'd have to be a super jet set Alex to be able to do that?
I do think that you can do it yourself, but it depends on personality. So, I'm happy and confident to talk to other accountants when I go to conferences, and network. But if, for example, that you were worried or afraid of things like that, then it's possible that you might then gear yourself towards an agency who will then do that work for you.
Absolutely. And I guess the next question I've got for you is around quality control, data protection, making sure they're aligned on tech, all of that kind of thing. I'm guessing that when you do it yourself, that's a whole lot easier because you just set the way it's done from day one. Have you ever used an agency, Alex?
No.
No. Okay. I won't ask you the question about how you go about it. I can share a little bit about how we do it. I give it to Ben, my ops guy. But on a serious note, we try to make sure that there's a level of qualification across the team. We look at ISO 9000s, things like this. We look at what data security they've got. We look at backups. We look at time zones. We look at language. And we also put in QC processes. So quality control, both onshore and offshore. So within the UK, we have quality control processes, but we also have quality control staff members that are offshored, part of our team, but their role is to be that filter and try to nip things in the bud. So there are a few of those things that we do. Alex, you mentioned that you like making a bit of a living out of having to sell what seemed to you to be really obvious concepts to other people. We need
I
you to sell
do.
that pen again. Can you sell the outsourcing, offshoring dream to firms listening to this today? Why
Oh
would a
my God.
firm do it?
I guess I would say that people would look at cost as accountants, and you could benefit from having a much more leaner practice if you outsource offshore. Because you can then do that for certain areas of your business. It doesn't have to be everything or one or like a whole department. It could just be one area like VAT or bookkeeping. And so if you get that right and you nail it, it would change your practice and how you work.
Fantastic. I want to go on to some more, I guess, out there questions and really pick your brains from the tech perspective now, if that's okay. So, the first question I've got is around, I guess, the art of the possible for the profession. We know AI is here, machine learning is here, we hear about it left, right, and centre. I think the biggest surprise for most people isn't that AI is a big thing now. It's actually that the software packaging that landed perhaps most dramatically was ChatGPT, and I think it was midwinter possibly, the picture creation tool, and that it was actually the creative arts effectively, so writing, imagery, videos, and so on, that have really seen an AI adoption. It was the more specialized subjects, so coding, for example. If you use vibe coding at all, it's just unbelievable to see what it can do. Quite literally, that world has been transformed by artificial intelligence. And we'd be remiss not to consider that this could happen to us as a profession as well. Now, I guess my first question is, with the way that the majority of firms decide to outsource or offshore, are they perhaps delaying the inevitable, and should they be adopting tech to do this instead? And then a follow-up question is, we use tech and artificial intelligence to, in theory, to leverage what we do to allow us to do bigger, better, and use our human relationship building, perspective, etc., more effectively and creatively. Will there be ways to use outsourced and offshore teams perhaps more effectively and creatively than we do at the moment, i.e., you have the bookkeeping and we do the complicated sums? So, yeah, there's my two questions for you.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to like the accounting world and what we're getting involved in now, if I look at my practice 4 years ago when I was bringing in AI and bringing in bots and RPA, etc., like we needed, say, 50% AI, 50% human to finish it.
Yeah.
If I look at my practice today, it's 90% AI, bots, etc., 10% human. So you would essentially need a human today to review that work, which could be
Yeah.
offshore. We could offshore that element, but
Oh, yes. And
because
anyone who's used ChatGPT for anything beyond one question will know that you need the human review right now, but that's a whole different rabbit hole we could go down.
100%, yeah. And so that was 4 years ago compared to today, and it's moving at a much faster pace. So in 6 months' time, I'd like to think that I've got bare minimum bookkeeping, and that's done. The target and the goal now is to then have the AI to review the data that the AI has just done to make sure that it's done accurately. So where does outsourcing come into it? The outsourcing, offshoring, essentially might come into the fact that they need still humans to put that data together and to review it from an accounting perspective. And so we're following all the UK legislation, etc., because as we know, that tech isn't there yet. But in 6 months' time, it may be. So it's moving at a fast rate. And so when it comes to like the human side of it, and in terms of what accountants and what bookkeepers and etc. could be looking at, is then the different types of business systems and processes they can utilize their skill set to bring into companies to help businesses become more efficient.
I love that. So I've got one follow-on question.
Yeah.
If we were to rewind, let's say 10, 15 years ago, there was a book called The World is Flat, and it was all about the equalization of economies through globalization and how outsourcing will kind of balance everything out. But we've had this big societal bomb insofar as AI, where if it depends on which predictions you believe or read, or if you even look into these things, but AGI is allegedly 2030 should be there, and it'll be quite a phenomenal change to the world. Um, Obviously, as humans, and I appreciate we're going down a bit of an obscure path here, guys, we won't talk about this for too long, I promise you, but I'm curious on Alex's view with both her globalized view and her tech view. Given that there could be this huge change, the digital nomad ability, so the ability to go abroad, to have a cuppa in the sunshine, work on a laptop because of the cloud tools and so on, was, I guess, enabled by tech. However, it's arguable from my perspective that we as humans will need to look at differentiators that we have going forwards versus a machine. Can you ever see a time when digital nomading would actually be impossible, so that the USP of a human will be their presence and their biological self rather than their digital self?
God, that's a tough question. I
That's a
mean,
deep question as well, isn't it?
it is a deep question because, like, I have seen changes in like global salaries, like what you were talking about. I have seen that, and even with like the offshoring, I have seen people leave because they understand the value of different like countries, and then they go to those countries and then like earn higher salaries. So it is balancing out, and companies are also like really being careful about their salary amounts. If they're hiring somebody, say from US to Mexico, they have to kind of be a bit more even. So is finding a balance globally. But in terms of being a digital nomad and USB, that's going to be quite tricky because more and more people are traveling, more and more people are leaving, to go and work in different countries for different reasons, not to do with work, to do with health, to do with like mental, like well-being, etc. So it's, if I think about my friends today, a lot of them are traveling and they weren't before. So even the fact that we met in Bangkok, for example. But if I, in terms of tech side of things, I've worked in the Meta. So if there is a situation where you're not going to be traveling, then you are stuck, and the human isn't going to be the main thing. And then we still have to meet people globally, because that's how the world is changing now. We'll probably meet in the meta. Like, we don't
Yeah.
necessarily need to travel. So I've done work in the meta. I've had meetings in the meta. You can train in the meta. There's so much you can do. And so even though the most people like wouldn't see that as the future. I mean, that's why you've got like the meta glasses with the Ray-Ban glasses and things like that, and you can do all this stuff. You just put those glasses on, it's going to read your financials, it's going to tell you everything.
Oh, it's crazy. In fact, I can't show you at the moment because I've just put them over there to take to an expo tomorrow. But they
Right.
are phenomenal, and where the tech is going is quite unreal. Just a pair of Ray-Bans. They look very ordinary, apart from a little flashing white light. And the newer developments,
Record.
where this can go. Put
Yeah.
it this way: our generation, Alex, we talked about our vintage. We're all hunched over from looking at phones. I doubt we'll have
Fingers.
phones fairly soon. It's quite surreal. Alex, thank you for entertaining that deep question. It's something that I spoke about on stage in Saudi at Leap, about the fusion between digital and biological. And, I spoke with a panel as well, and there was a huge divergence of opinions. It's definitely something that change is going to happen. But if we bring ourselves back to the present, for an average firm who has heard us talk about this for the last 5 minutes and for what on earth are they going on about, should they outsource right now, or should they try to find tech, or should they be doing both?
I would say mixture of both, because I think with the AI and the tech that's happening, and even how as my practice is now, like it's definitely having a mixture of both for now.
Fantastic. And I think that for practitioners listening, one of the big things for me is, as Alex said, making it simple, but also making it scalable. And oftentimes, both tech and outsourcing, even if not the full commitment of offshoring, even outsourcing can allow you to avoid that stepped cost of a new human when it's really uncomfortable, but you're working really hard at 11 p.m. on January the 30th. It's actually the 29th that we're recording this today, but it could have been the 30th. So yes, it is for me definitely worth investigating these things, but don't become too consumed by them. Let people like Alex, who are at the bleeding heart of innovation, do that. Let her make the mistakes and learn from her. Alex, what I want to do now is to find out a little bit about you. We're going to segue smoothly away from this. So, the first question I'm going to ask is if you could encapsulate your advice to firm owners around the subjects we've talked about, what would be the one bit of advice you'd want to give them?
I would say generally try to be open-minded about what's coming, and not to be too anxious about it, and speak to people like myself who can support you and help you through any strange questions that you're not sure of, because I'm a face-to-face person, weirdly. I prefer to go through things practically, as I said earlier. So definitely, just like try be open-minded, because it is changing, and it's changing at a fast pace. So we just need to be prepared.
Perfect. Next question. If you could rewind and give some advice to your younger self, what would that advice be?
I don't know. I would probably say not to leave it so long before jumping out into the entrepreneurial journey. Like, I pushed it and pushed it and left it and left it, and I was ready much earlier than I thought. Everybody was saying I was too young, so I definitely say like start that journey way earlier. And today it's actually more possible. So we're seeing much more younger entrepreneurs. So yeah, just take that leap of faith.
Your dream dinner party. If you could invite three other guests, who else would you have around that table?
Right. Who would
Yes.
I have? Oh my
So you
goodness.
can have three guests.
Richard Branson.
Okay.
And who else would I invite? Put me on the spot. This is what I don't know. Probably like Rod Drury. Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Rod Drury. Okay.
And I've got to pick
And
a third. I can't think right now. Hey, Carl Reader. There you go.
oh, there we go. There we go. So that's 2 out of 2 invites. Boom. Love that. So why would you invite Richard Branson? And Rod Drury, I know who he is, you know who he is, but it might be worth if you just mention who he is and why you'd invite him as well.
So Rod Drury is founder of Zero.
Okay.
So he's the OG. And so I would invite him because I've never met anyone so innovative and forward thinking in my entire life. And so
Sure.
it's like constant seeing the future and seeing the vision and knowing like potentially would have built like if he was to go back into his like product now, like I don't know where it would have been today, but I
Sure.
just know that his like future forward thinking element is just I've always like seen that as like super like insightful. And so I learned a hell of a lot during my journey with that support when he was the CEO. So
Okay.
Rod, and then Richard Branson. I've just read so much of his stuff, and I just remember early days, you know, when I was like wanting to be this like entrepreneur of like, oh, don't think about like, you know, how you're going to do it, just say yes. And it was like that's all I have in my head. It's like it's always his quotes that I think about when I've got all like these issues and concerns and challenges. And so I would just love to pick his brain and see what he thought. So that's probably
Fantastic.
him.
So you just say yes, and you're regretting saying yes to this podcast. Got it. Okay.
I'll work it out, I'll wing it.
Next question. There's a price limit of let's say 50 quid. What is the last small thing that you've purchased? Could be absolutely anything. Could be a product, could be a service, could be an app. It could be absolutely anything that has changed your life in some way.
Right, I tell you what, I did buy these new nail things that you don't, they're like cured gels that you put on your
Okay.
nails. So I don't have to sit in the salon for like hours on end and then ruining my nails. That's a game changer.
Oh, snap, honey. Look, what do you think?
So good.
Excellent. Okay, so next one. What is your go-to source of inspiration? So podcasts, websites, books. Where do you find yourself gravitating towards?
So I just gravitate towards meditation actually.
Okay,
So yeah, like I tend to find that just like fixes everything. I'll just meditate on that. So
excellent.
yeah, so just like you know, I enjoy like the sound healing, sound baths and things like that. So
Yes, and you are now qualified to do this as well, aren't you?
I am, yes, I'm a
Do
gong
not plug. Do not
practitioner.
plug your business. But she's now qualified to do this. I've experienced one, not with Alex actually, and it was surreal how relaxed I felt afterwards. Okay, next up, who's been the biggest influence in your life, Alex?
Influence. Oh my goodness. God, you're asking me tough questions. I can't think right now. I'm going to just say Rod again. I can't
Rod,
think. Yeah, he has.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So his vision, his energy, his innovation rubbed off on you.
Yeah, but it's not just about the tech. It's about what he's doing in New Zealand now. And all the stuff that he's changing and doing. So it's not just like about the entrepreneurial side, it's about him taking it above and beyond, not just about business. It's about the community and the global, even supporting like bringing digital nomad visas to like New Zealand and then changing them.
Fantastic.
It's
I love
crazy.
that. Next question. Let's imagine that little Alex was hopeless with a calculator. So,
Slam.
despite wanting to do accountancy from the day you were born, actually you had to do something else. What did little Alex want to do?
I wanted to be in fashion.
Okay,
So, like, yeah, because I just used to love art and all the creative side. So, I did at some point wanted to like, I used to like make my own dolls' clothes and things like that. My mum was a seamstress too, so I think that was from her really. But yeah, I loved that side of thing, and actually, I kind of do like crafts and stuff now. So, but that's like my hobbies and things like that.
fantastic. And the final one. What is the dream for you and your business? Where would you like it to go?
So, combined with future businesses, I'd like to scale them. I've kept them as like lifestyle businesses, but I'd like to have a go at scaling a business just to see where that journey takes me. So, it's just taking all the learnings that I've had over the years and all the people that I've got around me to support me. So, I'd love to know how I would get on in that journey. So, yeah, that's like that one I've
Fantastic.
started now. So, yeah.
I love that because, as we know, finance is the language of business. You've certainly on top of that, but you're also on top of not only where the world is with tech, but where it's going. Alex, this has been a remarkable episode. I've really enjoyed the fact that we've been able to cover both your unique journey that I think has probably been looked on by the accounting world with a combination of skepticism. Is she really doing that? A bit of envy, a bit of, wow, I know this person and she's doing that. You've done some remarkable things, but you've also been stepping up, speaking about tech and continuing on that journey. Hearing you today talking about your views on where tech's going and so on has been amazing for me. It's been a fantastic learning experience. And finally, having real world experience of building offshore teams and understanding that it's more than just paying an agency. It's about building that global culture. Ultimately, it's about people. Alex, you've done amazing things and thank you so much for sharing them here. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to let you carry on being not just at the cutting edge, but the bleeding edge of innovation. I'm going to watch what works, what doesn't work, and I'm going to copy what works. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks,
You're
Alex.
welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.